1985, Lorimar merged with another company, Telepictures.
I came to the conclusion, and I did, that had to be in first-run syndication, and we were not in that. We were just in network, and I realized that that was another part of the business that we had to be in, and we either could spend a lot of money of hiring people and building our own, or we could go out and see somebody who had first-run syndication and bring them into the thing. So we found Telepictures, and they had something even in addition. They had two of the best distribution executives, Dick Robertson in domestic and Michael Solomon foreign. So we brought them into the company, and we got their first-run syndication operation, and that was the reason we brought Telepictures into the company.
Why did you feel that syndication was important to get into at that point?
It was something that others had done, and I felt it could be a good profit center for the company, and it was just another part of television that we had to be in.
What kind of properties did Telepictures own or produce at that point?
I forget. They owned several that were not great. As it turned out, the first-run syndication business didn't turn out as good as we thought it would, but we did very well by getting the two executives that we wanted, Michael Solomon and Dick Robertson, and they ran our syndication operation just brilliantly. Robertson is still with Warner Brothers.
And by 1985, Lorimar had grown.
Oh, yeah.
How many people were working at Lorimar at that time?
Boy, a lot. I know that. I couldn't give you an answer.
Mm-hmm. And as we spoke about before, we're producing, as well as the television, feature films.
Right.
What were the goals of the company by this time?
Well, we had a sort of disparaging kind of goal. I mean, diversifying goals. My partner and I were not getting along. Merv came into the business and wanted to be in the more creative area, had a tremendous desire to be very big in the movie area, and didn't realize how much that would cost. Wanted to set up a syndication operation in motion pictures. When I pointed out to him, a distribution operation, I should say, in the motion picture area, and I pointed out to him how much money you needed for that. I mean, just to set one up would cost you about $10 million, and then you needed $200 million to feed it, feed motion pictures. So we were moving off in two different directions, and we didn't get along anymore. It was like a marriage. It was pretty much over. And so I left in 1986 and went to MGM.
What were Merv Adelson's strengths in terms of his...
He was a good businessman, but, and this sounds terrible to me, he was good in business, but wanted to be in the creative area and didn't have the qualifications to be in it. He was a good businessman.
Did he have regular day-to-day functions?
No, not really. He came in every day, whatever. He knew everything that was going on. He was more involved in the accounting area, in the financial area of the company than I was. And I was involved totally in the creative area. He was involved more in the business area of the company.
And when you resigned in '86, how did you feel about leaving the company that you...
I felt very bad. I built it from nothing, and it hurt. It hurt. But it had to happen, because if not, it would have blown up.
Mm-hmm. And did someone come in to replace you as head of that
creative? Merv, he took one of the, David, one of the partners of David Saltzman. And David Saltzman had evidently, and from what I heard, David and Leslie Moonves got into a big to-do, and Leslie threatened to leave. Leslie wanted the job. David wanted the job. And so I don't know what occurred there.
Looking back on the structure of Lorimar, what do you, and you've talked already about it was a happy place to work, people really enjoyed it. What do you attribute to the company's success, and did you have a particular management philosophy?
Well, I think, I feel that people have to work, and they work because to feed their families and to do all the things they want in life. And you've got to make their life as interesting and as good as possible, and give them working conditions so they'll perform better and they'll be happier. And if they're happier, it's going to be a better company. And if you can keep people happy, and if you can make them happy and care about them, and we cared. I mean, I used to set up picnics, and I used to set up lunches and things of just showing people we truly cared. I cared. And I did all that. I just felt that's my philosophy of management, that you've got to make people happy. You've got to show them that you care for them. You've got to care for their personal problems, you know? They're people.
Mm-hmm.
That was another thing that Merv and I never saw eye to eye on.
In terms of sort of the opposite side of that, which would be Lorimar and the focus on back-end profit, did you focus on that as well as the quality of the programming that you were making?
You mean the profit area?
The profit, yeah.
Oh, of course. I mean, I may not have watched the overall profit of the company. Merv did more of that than I did, but I did watch the profit of every episode and every series to make certain that we weren't going broke, which is where you could go broke.
And you even mentioned, I think earlier, that with the Rat Patrol way back, that there was times that you said, we need to stop now.
That's because right. I can't afford it anymore. Or the people who put up the money don't want to do it anymore. And then Merv, you know, if I had known Merv's background, I would have never become partners with him, ever. I remember I had to take, I got all kinds of flack from the networks about, the mob was involved with me, you know.
And where did that come from?
Well, Merv owned a piece of the Desert Inn in Vegas and owned a piece with Mo Dalitz of La Costa. And then he had a big suit with Penthouse magazine, who said that he and his partner, Irwin Molaski, were members of the mob. And he sued Penthouse and lost. So, and I had to go to the networks and say, look, he's not a mobster, he's this and that. And I'll never forget, as an aside, this is very funny. I took him into New York to meet Bob Daly Bob Wood and Freddie Silverman. And we walked into Fred Silverman's office just when he had gone to ABC. And the first thing he said to me is, I have such a problem. He said, I've got this series about black people called Roots, and I'm going to get killed in the ratings, so I'm going to run it in 1 week just to get rid of it. It's not mine, and I inherited it, and that's how Roots. And to this day, Freddie will take all the credit for Roots. But I took Mervyn to introduce him, so I had a witness. I remind Freddie of that.
Another perhaps controversial experience I think that you had during the Lorimar days in particular, and when you were producing, I think it was probably Dallas and Knots Landing, was that you took a lot of criticism from the Reverend Wildman about the content of the show.
I did a stupid thing. I really did. I got onto a program. He started to attack Dallas, and I wasn't paying a lot of attention to him. I felt, what harm can he do me? But then I made a terrible mistake. The fellow who just left CBS, who did Late Night, the white-haired fellow.
Rod Perth?
No, left CBS just last week. He used to be on Following.
Tom Snyder.
Tom Snyder, who I knew, talked me into would I get on an episode with Reverend Wildman. And I did that in New York, and it was the stupidest thing I ever did in my life, because I was the bad guy, and he was for, home things, and it was the worst interview I ever had in my life, because he made me look so ridiculous.
And his And he was coming from the perspective
Oh, sure,
of
that good family and
values.
home and all the value. And, you know, it was like apple pie, and I was the bad guy, you know. And he just beat me up, something fierce, and I should have never been on.
You know, something that I think comes out of the other more positive side of the Lorimar experience was that when Warner Brothers bought Lorimar, they inherited a number of series commitments.
Oh, yes.
In that that process.
Yeah, this probably never happened again in history. We had 3 series on the air at CBS: Knots Landing, Falcon Crest, and Dallas. They all came up for renewal at the same time. Now, that wouldn't happen again in a million years. And when they came up for renewal, I let everybody know that they were available. And even syndicated people came to me and said, we'll take the shows. We'll take, you know, ABC came to me, NBC came to me, everybody came. And CBS knew this. So we went in and negotiated with CBS. And beside getting great financial help, I mean, tremendous amounts of money for these 3 shows, they gave us commitments for 9 series. And that's part of what Warner Brothers inherited.
That may have even paved the way for
a lot of the series
that are on the air today.
Of course.
And certainly, when you look at that experience and what ER did more recently
Yeah.
with their renegotiation,
That's right.
I suppose that they didn't completely learn, although
That's right. We went at it, you know, it was just 9 series we got commitments for.
Today, in this particular market, one of the things that's happening is the networks are trying to own more and more of their
Oh, of
programming to
course.
avoid this.
Well, at that time, the government was there, and that
Right.
was the only time to be in business, you know, because we owned everything, you know, and they got the program and they paid for it.
And you had the leverage.
And we had the leverage. And, I mean, those days are gone, you know. Today, you want a show on the air, they got to own it. They got to own a piece of it.
When you left Lorimar, you moved on and became chairman and chief executive of MGM UA. How did you make that move? How did that come about?
Well, Kerkorian had been after me. I'd met Kerkorian, and in fact, Merv introduced me to Kerkorian. And so I got to know him, and he was after me, and I couldn't, when we had Telepictures, they insisted that I enter into a 5-year contract with the company because I was the company as far as they were concerned. So I signed a contract for 5 years to stay with Lorimar. Kerkorian wanted me, and he hired Jerry Weintraub at that time. Jerry lasted 3 months. And I couldn't go because I had signed the contract. Finally, he came back after me again, and I went to Merv and I said, look, I've got this contract. You know, we haven't been getting along. We have nothing but problems. I'd like to leave. Why don't you let me out of the contract? You know, and he said, fine, I won't stand in your way. I wish you well and everything else. So then I went over to MGM UA, and Merv promptly sued MGM UA for getting me out of the contract. He had written, I still have the letter, that I wish you well, and there have been good days and bad days, and I want you to do well, and then promptly turned around and sued MGM. What a sweet human being.
You were at MGM UA for
3 years.
For 3 years. Why was that a decision that you had made? You wanted to work for a particular period of time, or
No.
circumstances?
My contract was up, and Kirk was in the midst of selling the company, and that was one of the reasons I left, because here we were building the company. When I got there, they had a share of the market of 1.9%. When I left, we had 14.5%. And that was the only time the company was making money in that period of time because we had Moonstruck, Fish Called Wanda, Rain Man. I mean, we had a whole Baby Boom. We had a whole raft of hits that came at that particular time. And then I discovered while we were working, I was working my ass off. I really was working hard. I was learning. It was something brand new for me. We built a television division in the heat of the night, 30-something. I discovered he was outselling the company while we were working and building the assets. And I said, I don't need this, forget it. So I left.
Did you have specific goals when you went into the company of, for instance, building the company?
I think the only goals I had was to get them out of the quagmire they were in. I mean, they had nothing. And nothing was working. Alan Ladd Jr. was running the MGM area, and Tony Thermopolis was running the UA area. And, and they were I must take my hats off to them. They, Laddie bought A Fish Called Wanda, and we did Moonstruck together. So we did very, very well. I mean, when I left, the company was number 5 in the industry at 14.5%. And at the same time, we had a television operation.
So was it a satisfying experience in terms of
Yeah,
the
I
work?
learned a great deal. I learned a great deal about the movie business. I knew the television business pretty well, and I went over to Warner Brothers.
And you mentioned that The Heat of the Night and 30-something were a couple of the shows that you produced. Were you involved in a similar way as you had?
Not
with
as
Lorimar?
much as I was. Mm-hmm. I was more involved in the movie area and running the company.
After you left MGM UA, you formed your own production company in 1988, Lee Rich Productions. Tell me a little bit about that venture and what that was about.
When I left MGM UA, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and so I became Bob Daly and Terry Semel came to me and said, why don't you come to Warner Brothers? So I was there for 5 years. I did 6 movies there in 5 years. I did a couple of TV things. And it was fine. I enjoyed it. It was fine. I still would rather have run a company at that time. And, but I was having a good time, and I had a very good deal over there. And I made, the first picture I made was Hard to Kill with what's his name?
I know who you're talking about.
The nut.
Steven Seagal.
Steven Seagal. And we made that picture for $11 million, and we did over $60 million domestic. And I did that, and I did a picture with Sean Connery, Just Cause, and I did A Passenger 57. So I did those, and I enjoyed doing them, and I produced them. And I did some television, and that was it.
Did you structure this production company similarly to how you had with
No,
other
I had the motion picture guy running, being involved, and I had a television guy.
Mm-hmm. Was there any mirror in terms of a philosophy as you had with Lorimar in terms of the way you were going about doing your work, or because you were focused on features, was it a different kind of operation?
Well, it was a different kind of operation. It was an independent operation. It wasn't large. I think we had 6, 7 employees. That was about it. It was totally different. When you're an independent producer like that, it was totally different, and particularly the background I had come from, just running 2 companies, Lorimar and MGM. So it was totally a brand new experience for me.
And you still have this company, the independent
Oh, yeah.
company?
Then I went from there to Sony, and there we did 2 movies, which were both, I became partners with a fellow by the name of Gary Foster, and we did 2 movies, Desperate Measures and the Sharon Stone movie. Gloria. Both of them were not very good. And then I'm over at Paramount now and doing things there.
Can you talk about some of the current projects you're working on?
Well, I'm doing a wheel over there, an old, with several top writers.
A Wheel of Television
A Wheel
movies?
of Television. I'm doing it with Ken Follett, David Baldacci, and Robert Parker. And I'm doing a movie over there with Mandalay and Paramount called The Score, which I think we're going to get Michael Douglas in. And I've got a picture over at Warner Brothers that we're working on called Replay. So I've got my fingers into all of these things.
In the course of our discussion, you've talked about lots of television shows and films. Are there any that we've skipped over that you'd like to talk about or say a few words about?
Well, my favorite television show, of course, was Sybil. That was my favorite there. And my favorite series was probably The Waltons. My favorite movie was probably Being There. But I enjoyed them all. I really did, and we had lots of them.
I read a brief story that when Earl Hamner had come to have a discussion about the Waltons early on, that you had gotten up out of your desk and walked over to a table and sat down with him, and that it made the statement that you didn't take a certain powerful position, that you were coming sort of as equals. Do you see yourself as...
I don't remember that, but I sat at that table all the time with people. I sat there once with Steven Spielberg when he was a TV director. So, no, I always sat at the table. I never sat behind a desk.
Do you think it was a conscious decision, or...
No, I just felt that was the way to do it, you know. I also loved doing Rain Man. That was probably the best movie. And, and just putting that together, I lived with Kerkorian, and he used to ask me every single day. The budget was $30 million. And he'd ask me almost every day, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to do this? And needless to say, the more he asked me, the more I wanted to do it. And then we were looking for a director. We offered it to Spielberg. He wanted to do it, but didn't know how. And we offered it to director after director. And I must say that Mike Ovitz put it all together. And we did it. We paid, the world has changed a great deal. We paid Dustin Hoffman $6 million, and we paid Tom Cruise $4 million. And the picture was brought in for $26 million. And we did $180 million domestic, and more than that foreign, for a picture that he didn't want to do.
And was that considered for him at the time a big budget number when you were talking about $30 million?
Sure. We did Moonstruck for 11, and A Fish Called Wanda for 7. So that was a big number, $30 million.
What do you think is the key to successful network programming? And are there any programming strategies you think today that work for a specific reason?
Well, the business has changed so radically. It's today, if you get a show that has a 18 share, you're a big smash hit. When I think Blue Night was canceled with a 32 share. The business has changed. They don't give it a chance. It's all become a numbers kind of a game. You get an order for 6 episodes or 8 episodes. They put 2 on the air and they cancel it. Well, why buy it in the first place? And I just feel that the people running the network really don't understand the television business. None of them have ever produced a television show. Anybody you take at any of the networks. And they don't understand what makes it. And I think that the fact that you got major corporations in now, like Disney owns ABC and Fox is owned by Murdoch, and CBS now, Mel Karmazin owns, Infinity Broadcasting really owns it, NBC owned by General Electric. I think their demands and everything else are totally different, The days of Bill Paley and David Sarnoff and all those people who founded this medium and made it at least gave it the base of what it's become, their desires were totally different, I think, than they are today. Today it's, you know, and I suppose they're both right. Corporations need to make money. That's what they have, stockholders, and the stockholders want to see the money, and they want to see the success. And, you know, it's not, you take ABC, you take NBC, you take CBS, you take Fox, they all have stockholders, and they're more interested in what their stockholders think than, and they have to keep their stockholders happy. And they don't give a damn about the television thing except how it goes to their success with their stockholders. And that's correct, and that's the way it should be. I mean, if I ran a major corporation and had stockholders, I would be beholden to those stockholders. So I think the business has changed so radically because of that.
And what do you think those early presidents of networks and so forth, what they were after?
I think they were having a ball experimenting with a brand new medium. I mean, coming out of radio, and can you imagine the joy that you would get finding a thing called television, which had sight and sound? And I imagine that they enjoyed that. You know, Mr. Paley loved all that, and I'm sure David Sarnoff did. Leonard Goldenson, I know, did. They were the pioneers, and I'm not saying, and what they were doing was right, and what is being done today is right, but the whole ball game has changed, the whole ball game.
Can you talk about what you think are the most important element in creating a hit television series, or is there one element?
Sure there is. The writing. You know, it all, I don't care who the director is or the producer. If you haven't got a script, you have nothing. A director can't make a good movie out of a bad script, and he can't make a good television series out of a bad script. So you must get the writers. And I find that the problem today is with all these shows changing is that the writers that are being hired have no experience or have very little experience, you know. The writer in television has now become, you pay a kid that comes out of college $1 million if he writes a television series or is involved in a television. And I'm not saying they're bad writers, but writers have to have experience. Writers have to know what works and what doesn't work. And I'm glad to see a lot of the movie writers moving over into television, like Dave Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's wonderful. But he has experience, he's done movies, and he's done, and you can see it reflective in his work. But writers is where it all starts.
We're going to take just a brief pause and then come back to finish summing up.
Okay, all right.
Questions.
Hi, sweet.